Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Six Bridges Book Festival. I'm Diana Donahue, editor and publisher of Raye Magazine, and I'm glad you all are here this evening. I have a treat for you guys. I'm interviewing the authors of a story that is in the form of a book now on Little Rock's very own hidden figure, Dr. Raye Jean Jordan Montague. But before I get started with the introductions and everything, I would like to give a big thank you to Central Arkansas Library System, as well as the sponsor of this particular session, KUARFM 89.1. And I appreciate you guys for giving me the opportunity to participate this year. And I am very, very honored. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to some and reintroduce to others Ms. Paige Bowers and Dr. David R. Montague, the authors of Overnight Code, The Life of Raye Montague, the woman who revolutionized naval engineering. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Paige Bowers is a wife and mother, as well as an accomplished author and nationally published writer. Aside from tonight's literary work, Ms. Bowers is also the author of The General's Niece, the little known, I'm going to mess that word up.
No, you're not.
Okay. The Gaul, who fought to free occupied France. Bowers has been featured in Time Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, People Magazine, Good Morning America, and several other news and media outlets. Dr. David R. Montague is a father and a tenured professor of criminal justice at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and the executive director of online learning and faculty mentoring. He is a founding member of the UA Little Rock's Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity, and he is also the son of Dr. Raye Montague, the reason we are here tonight. So for those who are unaware of who Dr. Raye Jean Jordan Montague is, she revolutionized the naval engineering and became the first person to design a ship using a computer. And she is also the first program manager of ships in the U.S. Navy's history. With her Little Rock, Arkansas roots, she overcame countless barriers and made American history. So I don't want to take any additional time from tonight's presentation. So without further ado, Ms. Paige Bowers and Dr. David R. Montague.
Thank you so much.
To the audience, you are welcome to type your questions in the chat, and I will get to them during our Q&A session a little bit later. So with that, Ms. Bowers, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Diana. It was really sweet. We're so glad to be here tonight. This book has been quite a journey. And really, David should probably be speaking first, but I am going to read the anecdote from the book. I had not heard of Raye Montague, which is the sad fact that we find with so many women of color who are in STEM. With hidden figures brought many of them to light, but there are so many more out there. And Raye Montague is one of them, and a very important one of them because of her feats of naval engineering that she taught, but also the determination, the sheer determination she had to overcome Jim Crow through force of will and determination and creativity to make her way to Washington, D.C., to find her way into the Navy and then rise through its ranks. And just like a comet, she just flew right up the ranks. And her story, for a storyteller to be exposed to someone like this, who had a wonderful gift for telling stories in her own right, this was a gift, and it was a tremendous honor that David and his mother trusted me to help them with this story, because it could have been anyone, and I'm insanely grateful. But let me start with this anecdote before David picks up. It is probably one of my favorite stories, and she told so many wonderful stories in the book. It's about how the lengths she had to go to in order to get a raise and a promotion. So here we go. I was training women and men, and I suddenly realized that the men were starting to earn more money than I was, Raye said. I told Jack, their boss, that I taught these men how to use the computer, and yet they were making more money than I was. So I asked him why that was. He told me it was because they had a car and could come in at night. Because Raye didn't know how to drive, she used to carpool out to Carteret, Maryland for work because the bus didn't run that far outside of the district. So I asked Jack whether I could make the same money as the men if I had a car and could come into work at night, Raye said. He said yes and thought he was done with it. But that evening, I went to a used car lot and bought a 1949 Pontiac for $375. I had the salesman drive it to my house, and I volunteered to work the midnight shift for a month. At 10 o'clock every night, Raye would slide behind the wheel of her Pontiac and begin the slow, careful drive out to Carteret from her house. 2 hours later, she would arrive at the office where she'd work until the day shift came in. When the day people arrived, I'd laugh with them and help them get set up for the day, Raye said. They thought I was being kind, but I was waiting for the traffic to let up at 9:30 so I could drive home at no miles an hour. When I got home, I'd have to find a parking space I could just pull into because I didn't know how to park a car. Around the time Raye was crawling to work and back in her car, one of her aunts died, and Raye went home to Little Rock for the burial. Her mother, Flossie, had bought a car in the short time since Raye had been gone, and Raye drove it around town to practice. My mother had a friend who worked at the courthouse, and this friend said, "Raye, I see you're driving your mother's car. Do you have a license?" And I said, "No." So he said, "Do you want one?" And I said, "Yes." A couple hours later, he tossed it over to me because at that time you didn't have to have a picture ID, and I didn't take an exam. When I got back to DC, the Department of Motor Vehicles honored my driver's permit and gave me a DC permit. I proudly showed off my license at work, and everyone was laughing because they didn't think I had that kind of nerve. Raye's boss came out to see what all the noise was about, and she told him she had a new driver's license. Confused, he said, "Well, obviously you had one all this time." She told him she did not. He said, "You mean you've been coming in here on this military base and driving and you didn't have a driver's license?" Raye said. And I said, "Right." So he told me, "Well, surely you had a learner's permit." And I said, "No, because I didn't know how to drive." So he asked me who taught me how to drive, and I told him I taught myself, driving into work in the midnight shift. On the spot, she was promoted to digital computer systems operator and given a raise. I love that story. There was no way that story wasn't going to go in verbatim just because of the way she told it and the way she remembered everything. And it's so funny and it captures her spirit so well. And I can almost hear her telling it as I read it. So that's just a little bit of introduction to her spirit. And I feel like that's a really great way to kick it off for David to just talk about his mom.
Thanks, Paige. And I do want to also echo that was a wonderful introduction earlier, and how thankful I am to be able to participate in the Six Bridges Book Festival right here in Little Rock, where I am in Central Arkansas. And I always supported the Central Arkansas Library System, so very proud to be part of this. I'm going to share screen for just a moment and just show some images. And please tell me if you can see that screen.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So this is kind of the big one right here. This is where things kind of kicked off and the book really became a reality for my mother. And this is when she appeared on Good Morning America. You can see Robin Roberts and Michael Stray, and of course my amazing spouse Whitney, and my now 18-year-old and standing next to her, and Janelle Monáe, I know, and my mother there, and what's interesting about, because Paige did talk about the book and how honored she was to be part of the project. And I'm so glad that she accepted, joining this project. And we've really worked so closely together for 3 years now. Yeah. And so, but a lot of people don't know that my mother initially, thought about a book, but did not think that people would be actually interested in a book about her. Because she said, who is going to care about a career? And after Good Morning America, we were contacted by a literary agent in New York. And she told my mother, look, this isn't about your career. This is about using your career to do something to impact other people's lives. And it's overcoming all those odds. And that's what people would care about. And that's when she agreed she would start writing this book. So Overnight Code is something, as a book project that she initiated. And then with Paige, and then I jumped on board when my mother became unable to continue working on it in the hospital. And then it was, her goal to get it out to represent her after she was gone. And I think it's doing that right now. So with that, this is her college yearbook photo. And you can tell this is from Arkansas AM and N. Now that's called University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And remember, the schools were segregated. My mother graduated college in 1956. So that was literally the year before Central High School was desegregated. That's an important fact for people to know, because all the time during her career, people assumed that the reason she was able to get the education she did was because of Central High desegregation. And she had already graduated college before that happened. So when she went to college, the schools were segregated. She wanted to study engineering. And we talk about it in the book. The University of Arkansas state system had an engineering program at University of Arkansas Fayetteville, but they did not accept minorities in the program. So even though she had the grades for it and the desire to do it, literally because of the color of skin, she couldn't go. So my mother became an overachiever. She was raised by strong women. You could tell by all the things she was involved in that photo that she was told that she needed to really prepare herself because the world was going to be unforgiving. And this is a picture of her in 1961, because literally the day she graduated college, she jumped on a train and went to Washington, D.C. and got a job at the Navy. And this is her in the Applied Mathematics Laboratory at the David Taylor Model Basin. And you can see her right in the front row with those computers in the background, those old reel-to-reel computers. And I like this photo a lot. It really says a lot to me. This was in one of the Navy newsletters that went out. And for people to understand kind of the significance of where this location was in terms of a military facility, it is literally the facility where they have a test tank for ships, and they build scale models of ships and test them in the water. And I, as a little kid, grew up walking or running up and down the tunnel. I didn't fall in, but I ran up and down the tunnel. And I spent a lot of time at that facility and many other naval facilities. But I think this is an interesting photo too.
Well, the other reason why that's interesting, if you look at this photo closely, and I remember the day that we picked this out, David, I stopped and I looked at it and I said, she is the only woman in that room. Mm-hmm. And the only person of color,
except for the guy in the back.
To me, I thought if there is a picture that tells a story that we need to have in this book, it's got to be this one, because this is so indicative of everything she was fighting against and fighting within. So that was one of the reasons why that spoke to me. But I love the idea of David running up and down this tunnel as a little boy. It's another very vivid, image. Sorry, David, go ahead. I didn't mean to jump in.
No. And for the techies out there that know about supercomputers like the Cray and so forth, the Lark was an early supercomputer, if you will, and that's what they were demonstrating at that time in that lab. So this was like a very high level technical thing. And here it is, my mother had a business degree, not even an engineering degree, but she knew math and she knew science, and she excelled in that, going through segregated schools, and was able to find a way to make it work. So obviously the book is called Overnight Code. And as Diana mentioned at the beginning, it's because she's credited with being the first person to design a rough draft of a US naval ship using a computer. And so for people to understand the significance of that, that process used to take about roughly 2 years to draw out by hand by a team of people, engineers, architects. And um, so when she was able to develop a computer program that was able to do that process in 18 hours and 26 minutes, and the reason that there was a push for it is because Richard Nixon, who was president of the United States at the time, he wanted to be able to compete with the Soviet Union and to be able to build enough naval ships. So that's why that image is there. So, and it's also important to know that when she would design a ship, because she designed a whole lot of ships in her career and then moved into management within the Navy. It was mentioned earlier, first female programmer of ships in the Navy. She would design the first ship of a class. So it's like designing the mold, and then they would build more ships based on that. And some of her ships are still at sea today. And she did get to meet a lot of sailors and Marines that served on those ships. She was very proud of that. This is one of the ships. This is the LHA #1. This is literally the first of her ships that she ever got to see in person and walk on. And it was by happenstance. She happened to be down in Mississippi, and they were building, I believe, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And she was visiting with the naval captain as part of protocol for the Navy, because her civilian, she was a civilian, but she had military status in terms of like her level of her role in the Navy as a civilian, and her equivalency was a captain. So in terms of when she would go to naval facilities, they would do the protocols equivalent to what a captain would receive. And so that captain found out that she was there as the equal opportunity officer when it was a voluntary position before, back in those days, as a collateral duty. And this captain didn't realize she was the Raye Montague that had designed the ship that they were building at the facility that he was over. So he invited her out. And that's when she realized that all those years, this is many years after she designed the first ship, all those years they had launched ships, and she had never been invited to any of those ceremonies, which is kind of disappointing. But she took lemons and made lemonade with it, because I remember she came home with this picture to the house, and she was so excited. And even though she had that realization that she had been left out even after designing these ships, she felt proud, because being able to see one of her ships in person really gave her even more resolve for wanting to do all she could to protect our country, and also to protect the people who served on her ships. And that included the contractors that were building the ships. Safety first, making sure they could function at sea. And it's also important for viewers to know that not only did she design the ships, but she would also go through the process of the initial build to make sure that all the specs were up to par. This is another one of her ships. This is the Eisenhower. This is the last ship, and I've got many more, but I'll just show you these. This is the last ship. The SSN-21 was a nuclear submarine, the Seawolf, that she ever designed. And the irony is that, it's the last ship and the only sub that she ever designed, but she first built her interest, or gained her interest in becoming an engineer, after seeing a Japanese submarine here in Little Rock, Arkansas, that had been captured during World War II. And she was 7 years old, and she was taken down to see it, and they took her down in it, and she saw the little gauges and dials, and she asked, what do I have to do to be able to build something like this? Because I want to do it. That looks really, I'll use the word cool, neat, And the person that was giving the tour was saying, well, you have to be an engineer, but you don't have to worry about that. And of course, that meant, well, you're a woman and you're Black, and you can't study engineering anyway. So, and the reason I say because you're a woman is because it's important to realize at that time, girls in school were not allowed to take a class called shop. And that's where it was only reserved for boys. And so that's where they would go in and build things and that type of thing. And girls could take a class called home economics. And so she had no interest in home economics, and so she, my grandmother, Flossie, fought so she wouldn't have to take it. So, but I thought it was ironic. This was the last ship she ever built, and it was the submarine is what got her interested in naval architecture in the first place.
My life has a way of coming full circle in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And so this is just her official Navy photo when she became program manager of ships. And PMS 309 was the name of the program she was over. It was called the Information Systems Improvement Program, and was part of Naval Sea Systems Command. So she did her entire career with one employer, the US Navy, 33 and a half years. And this is her in retirement, with just some of her, awards and things. And the one that's right there on the bottom right, that's the Meritorious Civilian Service Award. It's the third highest honor in the US Navy. And that was given to her for the overnight code, designing that first ship. And this is when she went back in 2017 to be honored by the US Navy. This is at Naval Sea Systems Command. I call it NAVSEA, as the Navy's hidden figure. And so she got a chance to be on stage and meet people. Sadly, after the event was over, we went to lunch, and some of the women who worked there said that they're still dealing with some of the same obstacles that she dealt with. And here in Arkansas, this is in 2018, and this is the importance of this photo for me is, remember I told you that girls were not allowed to take shop and they weren't encouraged to do math and science. And so she had to fight to get all the math and science classes that she could, and then took a lot of computer classes on her own as an adult. And so in Arkansas, we have the Arkansas Science Olympiad, and that's where middle schoolers and high schoolers have a day of science competitions in all different types of categories. And the Arkansas Science Olympiad board of directors found out about her story and that she lived here locally and created the Raye Montague Trophy. And it goes to top honors for a middle school and a high school. And she was able to give out the very first Raye Montague Trophy to Central High School that you see her standing on the left. So she was, and I remember her telling me, because she was in a wheelchair at that time, she stood up for the photo. She said she just couldn't believe that here it is nowadays, girls are being encouraged to study STEM. And she was just so happy and proud about that, being able to see that in her lifetime. And the significance of this photo is, remember I told you that the schools are segregated. When she took that train up to Washington, D.C. after graduating college in 1956, the train cars were also segregated. Black people rode in what were called colored cars, and they were not allowed to eat in the dining car. They had to either bring their own food, or porters would bring a cart and sell them things in the colored car. And so the reason I'm showing you this picture is, she was wheelchair bound at the time that she went up to be honored by the US Navy as their hidden figure in 2017. And so I took this photo of her because on one leg of the train trip, which took 2 days, I took her into the dining car and she was eating, and she looked out the window and started smiling. And I didn't know this, but she always, I asked her why she's smiling so much. She said, "Can you believe it? It's been 61 years. This is the first time I ever legally eaten in a dining car," because when she was younger, the porters used to sneak her into the dining car to be able to eat because only white patrons were allowed to, passengers were allowed to do that. So this is the first time that 61 years later that she was able to eat in that car on a train. This is her having fun. This is being honored by the Arkansas Black Hall of Fame. And this is us, our family, that same night. I'm sorry, different night that she went back to be for the 25th anniversary of the Black Hall of Fame. This is when she was inducted in 2013. And you see my family there. And this photo is of the book we're talking about being selected and honored by Robin Roberts during the pandemic. And this is in Times Square on the big Jumbotron. And I just couldn't believe it that morning. And Paige actually took this screenshot and sent it to me. I just couldn't believe it. And my mother's favorite color was blue. And the thought that they put it up there and it made it look that she would have just loved it. So that's information about us. And I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over.
Thank you for that. Very informative. I do have a question, if you can elaborate. I looked at a previous interview and she mentioned that she really cherished being awarded the flag. There was a flag that was, I believe, was flying in Washington. Can you elaborate on that significance to her?
She was honored right at her retirement. There was a U.S. flag. I think you have to be nominated by your senator, Asa Hutchinson. Is that correct, David?
David Pryor. David Pryor.
David Pryor. I apologize. Had that fly up over the U.S. Capitol in her honor. It was folded in a beautiful, like military-style triangle, and presented to her in honor of her service to the military. And she treasured it because she was, at her heart, she loved, she knew America was flawed, right? But she was proud of her service to this country that maybe wasn't always so kind to her. Yeah. And to be honored in this way was this touching moment for her. I apologize. My Wi-Fi busted out like while we were in the middle of this, so I'm glad to be back on. Apologize for that.
It was perfect timing. Okay.
I'll just add one thing to that is that along with that flag, and you saw it there. Well, I don't know if you saw it in the image I showed of her being honored by Naval Sea Systems Command. But in addition to the flag, she was given a certificate at her retirement, indicating that it had been flown over the U.S. Capitol in her honor, and it was signed by the architect of the U.S. Capitol, and that just made it even more real for her. So that was given to her at retirement. She just loved it.
Yeah, I thought that was very powerful to read about everything she endured, even before she got to Washington, and just being in Arkansas, but then to get one of the highest honors, one of the highest awards or accolades. That I thought that was very, very significant and powerful.
Yeah.
My next question, I guess you actually kind of answered it. I was thinking that she was actually in the Navy, but she was not.
She was a civilian. You can you can work, you can be a sailor or captain or what have you, but then there are also a different tier of workers that are more like management, the engineers, for example, that build the ships, publicists for various arms of the Navy. These are all professional designations.
Yeah, and that was also powerful to me because she wasn't even in the Navy, officially, but she was going up the ranks, and it kind of gave some clarity on why she just endured, or not endured, but received so much tension and resistance, because, it's just, I just love her story. But okay. So do you think that her process to building the ships and designing the ships got easier as technology advanced, or was it always the same process?
I think it evolved over time with the technology that was constantly evolving. I'm sure the program that she perfected is kind of like, the first Apple iPhone, it goes through these different versions. And so it's evolved since then. But the heart of that, which, guides, I'm speaking in layman's terms. I'm also not an engineer, so I've had to learn how to, so that the early technology inspired or kind of guided. It was kind of the foundation for the technology as it developed and got more modern.
Okay.
And I'll just add to that, it's important for the listeners to know that, it wasn't just the Navy that was, going through technological advancements. All the military, a lot of technology advances happen starting in government, and especially in the military, and then move over to private sector in a lot of cases. But so my mother worked with people that were doing similar types of things with technology. They called it numerical control. With the Army, with Air Force, she was working with NASA. She was working with private industry as well, automotive industry, airplane industry. So I think so she saw the evolution of the technology change in every aspect, and actually was one of the people that kind of back in the early days of what became computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing. And nowadays, a lot of the younger people, kids that they're playing these CAD, computer games, things like that. My mother and that cohort were the ones that really helped develop computer-aided design and later computer-aided manufacturing. And so think of overnight code as computer-aided design that had to later be manufactured. And so she literally
go hand in hand.
That's correct. And so she met, a lot of the people that designed a lot of the early computer programs, and she never tried to take credit for anything that she really didn't do. She understood she was part of a complicated a process, and it took a lot of great minds and a lot of energy and a lot of coffee to get things to work. And she really valued being able to be part of just moving technology forward in many ways.
One of the things that I noticed is that she comes from a long line of strong women. And one of those was your grandmother, Miss Flossie. Yeah. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What can you tell me what her significance was to getting her daughter to be this historic woman? Like, what was the influence over the years?
Well, there were, like you said, there were many strong women, but my grandmother, Flossie, my mother's mother, in particular, I mean, she used to refer to my grandmother as the wind beneath her wings. And so, and I mentioned, my grandmother, for instance, one example of supporting her, and that's what I'm getting at, is fighting the school district to let her be able to, take shop, that was against, the rules. And people just didn't understand. Why would you want a girl to be able to do? That's not what girls are supposed to do. At least that was thought back then, And so always being supportive of her. When she found out my mother wanted to be an engineer, she immediately took her to the library and started researching what does it actually take to do that, supported her being able to, do everything she could, be involved in any way she could, and certainly pushed her to be involved in a lot of school activities to gain a lot of experience, as I showed in the yearbook photo, and the importance, and taught her the importance of always developing yourself even after you achieve a goal. And so I gave the example earlier of, even though my mother didn't have an engineering degree, she learned a lot about computer technology. She had a business degree, which helped her as a business manager later in the Navy, but she went to night school in Washington and took classes on how to, build computers. So when a lot of people understood how to use one of these, she understood how to put it together, and that helped her down the road. And so, but not just the technology. She taught her, my grandmother taught her the importance of being a well-rounded person, because it's not just doing your job well that moves you forward in life. You have to know how to interact with people. So, that importance of instilling or engendering the importance of self-development. My mother put herself in Toastmasters at one point, and actually helped to be a charter member, I think, of the Toastmasters Club in Carter Rock at the facility I showed you in the photo. And so
the
she's
thing
one of
that's
the charter
interesting
members.
about it is it was an all women. I think it was one of the few all female chapters at the time.
Right.
Based on what we've found out. I think the other thing that's interesting about the strong women that kind of played a role in showing Raye what she could become. I think when you are young, you need to know that someone sees you, first of all, but you also need to see women doing things that, you need to see women changing a light bulb, rewiring a lamp. This is what her mother and her aunts did. They showed her that there was no such thing as men's work. It was all just work.
Right.
And so, of course, she's going to say, what do you mean I can't take shop? Of course, she's going to take every possible because doors were closed to her. She was not going to accept that. She was going to take every math and science class she could, in addition to the business classes she would take. And it really kind of building this knowledge up on her own, and by watching people that she worked with, it was really, she self-educated. And in a sense, like when you come at something with a traditional degree, you see things only one way in a book. If you come at a problem, maybe not with the engineering degree, but with the mindset of a problem solver, you see things other people don't see. And I really believe that that's how she was. She taught herself how to do all this stuff. She watched other people do it. And then she kind of said, you know what? I got a better way. And in doing that, in seeing what she saw from the women in her family, who were all, their own women by any standard, she was able to put together an education for herself that worked better than possibly any engineering degree could have.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to be inspired by that. The sheer, I talk about her driving a car out to Carteret that she doesn't even know how to drive in order to get a promotion and a raise. But the fact that she would, she had this one conventional door closed to her, and yet she went off on another path and still could achieve the same things. That's remarkable. That's truly remarkable.
Yeah.
And especially during that time.
Yeah.
Of such rich ferment for people of color, and then for women. The Navy had a problem with people of color. It was not promoting people of color, and it acknowledged that eventually. And then it tried to solve the problem. It had a problem with women. She knew that. She lived through it. And she fought through it. These two parts of history, her history within the Navy, her history in general, along with the backdrop of the history that was going on, the two fed into each other. Yeah. And it's amazing. It's like a little puzzle.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
The only thing I was going to add also is I think it's important for the audience to know that I think one of the other major things that my grandmother Flossie instilled in my mother was the importance of not doing things just to better yourself, but to do things so that you can help improve things around you. Remember, they grew up in the Jim Crow South, and people had to work together. And and a lot of people she went to school with immediately left Arkansas because they didn't see any opportunity in Arkansas at that time, and moved to DC, Chicago, and other places like that. And so my mother realized that she wanted to make a lot of difference in the world. She had to do well for herself, but she also had to learn to network and partner with other people and work as part of a team. And so she, joined great groups. She joined, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority when she was in college. She joined the Links Incorporated, which is a group of amazing women around the world. And I'm glad she did because, my mother-in-law is a Link, and if not, I wouldn't have met my amazing spouse that I have right now. So, but these powerful groups. I mean, like I'll use the Links for instance. I when I grew up as a child, the Links were putting programming together in Prince George's County, Maryland, and they would have all these programs to raise up, younger people. and to let them know that they had opportunities, and they were going into the community and doing health related things, and it was always inspiring. Like Paige said, bringing in people that were doing these things out in the real world and saying, hey, these people are real. They've had real stories, they've had real issues, but you can achieve things just like them. So what I'm getting at is that it was never a sense of Raye Montague just going off and doing all these things to improve the world. It's like working together with other people.
Back.
Yes, and giving back, she always believed in leaving a place better than how you arrived.
And she thought that was really, like, for all that she did in her life, for all the accolades she got, for all the engineering feats of fancy she did, at the end, as she looked back on her life, she thought she was really put here to make the world a better place, to help other people become the people they were meant to be, and to inspire people. And my gosh, she did. She really did. There were kids. When I was in Little Rock a couple of years ago, we were putting the finishing touches on this book. David gave this lovely presentation to a group of kids. There was a summer school or a STEM summer camp on his campus. Right. And he read the children's book about his mom. He talked about his mother's life. And they asked us to stay for snacks, and we couldn't do it because we had somewhere else to go. But we would have stayed if we didn't have to go there because we like snacks. But so what happened was we got back, and there were all these little cardboard cards, or not cardboard, construction paper cards shoved under the door of his office. There was one with a caricature of him reading, and it was like, thank you, your mom sounds amazing, and I wish I had known her. I like to learn about like ships and stuff like that. But there was a young lady that wrote this note to him, and it said, thank you. It was, in effect, it was, thank you so much for coming today. Your mom sounds amazing, and you are too. And then she recognized, like his kids recognize, your parents are an important part of your life. And it hadn't even been a year since David's mother had been gone. Yeah. She wrote, it takes guts to be here, especially since your mom hasn't even been gone a year. And David has been the most amazing partner throughout this whole process because he has shown up. This book found a publisher right as his mother passed away. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I'm just a transcriptionist at the end of the day. The storyteller is Raye and David. They are the heart that made this possible. He showed up. It was not easy the whole time, but this is a love letter to his mom. At the end of the day, this is a love letter to this tremendous woman.
And it's a beautiful one. It's a beautiful one. Yeah. It really is. And so, I hate that she thought no one wanted to hear her story. Like it's a great story. I'm glad she was talked into go ahead and getting this done. Yeah. It's a beautiful story. Yeah. I took a lot of bits and pieces and applied it to my own personal life. I was just really encouraged because just to know she's from Little Rock, a Black woman from Little Rock, you don't really see that a lot. And then personally, she was a single mother of a Black son. And so I am too. And it was like, if she can do it back then, if she can accomplish everything that she did back then with her head held high, still having a joke for everything, her personality was still bubbly and welcoming. And I loved how she always used to say, rascal. I got that rascal out in 18 hours and 26 seconds. I really liked that her energy was just always so positive. That was just really inspiring. So you guys did a great job with getting that message across, really. I think there was a question that popped up.
Did Raye meet Grace Hopper? David Duke. We know that
no.
she met Betty Holburton, who was one of
Right.
the big. Did she? I can't remember. Did she meet Grace Hopper?
I don't think so.
And then, while David was a boy running along the Navy ship testing tank, did he realize how extraordinary his mom was? Was it just your normal, or were you aware of how significant your mom's breaking the color gender line was? That's a great question.
It is a great question. The answer is at first no. It was just my mother, and like I said, you mentioned, Diana. Grew up in a single parent household, and my father left when I was 9 weeks old, and so my grandmother moved up to help my mother raise me in Washington D.C. And so I spent a lot of time in Navy facilities. I grew up around there, and I just would go and have fun. And for me, it was just a big playground. And it did not really. I mean, of course, as I got older, things started to piece together. I did realize as a child that I saw things that some of the friends in my neighborhood knew nothing about. And I was always surrounded by technology. I mean, my mother had the same setup at home that she did at work, and I would be at home. I'm at my work right now. I literally had the same setup at home, but I got a new computer at home, and I didn't want to trust it because I just haven't set it up yet. So I'm using the new computer that is set up here at the office. So I'm the same way, but I did learn as I became older, kind of the uniqueness of a lot of the settings that I was in. I got at the Navy's expense, I got to travel around the country. Because she was a single mom, and so I got to travel around, and Navy got to pay for it, but it exposed me a lot of things, and that's when it started kicking in. As the more trips that we took, the more exposure to things, and then when I would go visit her at work, meaning in the office at work, that's when I really got to see the type of interaction, especially as she started rising up in her positions in the Navy, and seeing her managerial side there. And I saw people, you mentioned the word rascal, she used that term to deal with people to try to get over on her, and a lot of people came at her, and I learned a lot of lessons from her, watching her. She was playing chess, not checkers. She was moving around. She was moving pieces around and thinking. She always told me, always, think 3 or 4 moves ahead of somebody else if you can. And so I learned a lot about what a great person she was, and how unique my situation was as I became older. And I really did gain a real appreciation for it. So by the time I went off to college, I was one of the few. This is 1984. I was one of the few people at Morehouse's campus that had a computer. I knew how to use a computer, and we didn't even have a real computer lab. So I really am happy that I was able to have that exposure. And I know I carried your question a little to the side, but I think I learned a lot of life lessons. But I'll be quiet now. That's enough.
No.
I love it. Keep going.
Yeah, the thing about her too that I loved, in talking to people about her, was that she was this tremendous woman who had accomplished a lot of things and was a mother and friend and all this kind of stuff. She could always find a way to connect and find commonality with anyone. And it was this amazing touch that she had. She would probably, immediately bond with you, Diane, over what it is to be a Black professional and a single mother. She would probably connect with you and give you some wisdom, something that you could carry forward. That's just her heart. And it takes a rare person to be able to find that. She's just this extraordinarily human person who had a gift with people from all walks of life. And I think that's something that really touched me as I worked with David on this, and as I wrote and as I thought about it. Right. And I try to bring that forward myself. I try to think about the way that she moved in the world, and I think, if we took the time to stop and find that common ground with people the way that she did, I mean, the world might be a little bit better off. Just a thought. you know?
And just as a throwback just to the previous question, just kind of connect to what Paige is saying, one of those other things that, when I learned about how unique her situation was and how unique my situation was, one of the things I really learned about how as she was rising up the ranks, one of the things that really worked well for her, and she believed it in her heart, was that, she understood overcoming tremendous odds. And so, and different people would use that experience or set of experiences and react in different ways. She was not, of course she didn't like it, but she was not bitter about it. She used it to really inspire her to not be one of those people that would use her advantages against somebody else. And so what I'm saying is she treated everybody the same way. She valued everybody. She didn't care where you came from. She didn't care about your orientation. She didn't care about, any of those things. She just mattered. She just cared about whether or not you were willing to work hard and try to improve yourself and try to give back to other people. And I think that was, again, not only was it good, a good philosophy to have, but it really helped her to work well with other people, and in her travels, in her, and it just worked hand in hand. So just being good, trying to be a good person and trying to just treat people the right way, is not only good for yourself, but it benefits everybody. And I think that's one of the messages that she always wanted to let people know. And to Paige's point, she did love talking and inspiring everybody. She would even go to the prisons in her retirement with me. In fact, Paige, when she came here to visit Little Rock, I took her down to the serious and violent offender unit down in Pine Bluff, where we would do rehabilitation programming. And she met with the person who was in charge of that program, a lifer named Bonnie Moore Shabazz. And we gave him a copy of the book. I sent him a copy of the book afterward. But she got a chance to kind of talk, Paige did, with Bonnie about, how my mother used to come in there and try to inspire people who were incarcerated and let them know that that's not the end all be all for a lot of them. So she would speak to any group that was out there. And I just think it's important for the audience to know that about her as well.
And she was a great bridge player. I learned that too.
fierce bridge player, fierce. She would come home from the bridge club some nights and she would say, "Boy, I got that $2 prize. I beat him. Knocked the socks off of him."
Okay. Well, that was all of my questions. Did either of you want to add anything? I think, have I addressed all of the questions in the chat? Oh, how did she get that first job in Washington so quickly after graduating? Harriet Powell asked.
Is David on?
Me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, she tried to get a job a lot of different places, but the Navy was the first one that hired her. And here's the irony, remember, this is 1956. And so they saw that she had a Bachelor of Science degree. And in Washington, D.C., in the Navy, they just made the assumption that she understood computer technology. She had never seen a computer. And, going back to the driving a car story, they were like, "Oh, you know to use a computer, of course, don't you?" And she's like, "Sure, of course," knowing that she's going to have to teach herself. Right. And so that's kind of how she got her first job. She just tried really hard, kept stomping the pavement, if you will, or, and the Navy was the first place that responded back. And I think for your audience to know too, don't think that she came in, when I showed you that picture of her in the David Taylor Model Base, and she came in doing technology related positions. She came in with a college degree and started at the very lowest level you could at the Navy. A grade 3 clerk typist is the job that they gave her. And she had to fight and claw her way into, other jobs of being an analyst and other types of things, computer operator and so forth, and then rising up in the ranks.
And I appreciated that she mentioned how people thought that she was a man, I appreciate that as well because she played that card very well. She milked that, and I love that. So,
I
one
was
more.
I was
Okay.
I was with her in California when she went to get an award, and I was young, and I think it was the National Computer Graphic Award, Imaging Award, and and she was and I was walking up with her toward the podium area, and somebody walked up to her and said, "Oh, are you Mr. Montague's secretary? Can you let me know when he'll be here?" And she just put her hand out and said, "No, I'm Ray. I'm your speaker."
I love it. I love it. Another question has come up from Karen. Is her story currently being taught in our schools? It certainly should be.
Yes, yeah. Paige mentioned there's a children's book as well. This is it. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. The Girl with a Mind for Math, Julia Mosca, and it's being taught in the early K through 12 area by some schools. And I know, and the reason I know that is because even during the pandemic, some school kids have reached out to me by email, or their teachers have, and said that they are wanting to look up and do a school project. And so I've been sent PowerPoints by school kids to show me the final project. There was a group in I think it was Indiana, and they did a team project for their middle school about my mother, and they were put in a competition, and they didn't win first place, but they sent me the news clipping from their local newspaper of all of them at the event. This is pre-pandemic, obviously. So the answer is yes. It's being taught, and there is a program, an effort to try to get, the children's book in every library in every school in Arkansas, and then to try to get overnight code into, because certainly overnight code is a life lesson story for any,
Right.
I would think, any college
Yeah.
student or
Right.
high school student. So that's, yeah.
And one more question. You talked about her overcoming a lot, getting into shop, working in an all male environment. What were some of the other obstacles that you remember her overcoming, particularly towards the end of her life?
There were a lot of people that did not like her success. I saw her, she was to receive an award, and this is when I guess I was in high school, and this is in Washington, D.C., and she was threatened and told that if they did not want a woman to go and accept that award, and if she showed up, they were going to kill her. And she did show up anyway, but the Navy took the threat seriously, and they moved her office to a different location, and then they moved her car to closer to the security booth, and they did literally, because I have a copy of the incident reports. There was an incident where some people were messing with her car, and there was an instance where some people had broken into her office at the Navy, and were trying to look for records. So, and that's a lesson that she taught me is, always make sure that you secure things, and I do that here now. And this is back then. I don't know if they still use the same kind, but they were called Mosler. That's my recollection. Mosler kind of safes and file cabinets that had dial lock, locks on them. And she ordered a bunch of those after that incident happened. There were some people that were very upset when they found out that she had an actual line item in the federal budget and was going to brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff on a monthly basis over at the Pentagon. And so she had her own parking space at the Pentagon, and some of the Navy brass did not like it. So good thing is she had a lot of allies and she had a lot of supporters. But there were a lot of people that every time she was trying to do something, somebody would try to find a reason to shut it down. And that's, again, I mentioned playing chess. That's the importance of learning how to play different moves. And you can either try to work with somebody and try to iron it out, or you can just say, okay, fine, we'll do it your way, or you can just remove them. And so she removed some of the problems.
Yes, she did. Well, everyone, we have reached our allotted time for this conversation, and this will conclude this session. Thank you both for taking this time to do this and talking with me. Thank you, Cal Library System and KUAR FM 89.1 for sponsoring this session. If you are interested in getting this book, please do so. You can get it at the Six Bridges Book Festival's website, or you can get it from the Wordsworth Bookstore located at 5920 R Street in Little Rock. And they do ship nationwide as well. This is a great piece to put in your home or to give a young mind that's interested in mathematics and sciences. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and thank you, Mrs. Bowers and Dr. Montague, for taking the time to be a part of the festival and for talking to me again. And it was my absolute pleasure. Everyone, have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.